Got it. Hello and welcome to day 22 of the Hubzone Small Business Summit. I love how Courtney laughs because she realizes that this has been a long couple of weeks, and I think we all realize I did not fully think this whole concept through. But you know, we've had a long couple years with everything that's going on with COVID, and our goal of this event was to be able to help as many Hubzone businesses as we possibly could. And in my apparently wine-induced state, because that's the only logical explanation I have, I thought is let's close down the fiscal year together. Let's cover different key topics impacting the small business community. And I'm so honored to have such a great network of industry experts, such as Ms. Fairchild that'll be speaking today. She has become my industry expert for GSA, which I'm not sure she really loves that she got volunteered for now, but that is just because she is so knowledgeable in this arena. And to be perfectly honest, dealing with GSA schedules, it is difficult, and a lot of people act like they're experts. And in my experience, it took me years to find somebody I was comfortable in referring somebody to. So read between the lines there, guys. But I'm super excited to have her here with us today. And I think that you guys are really going to enjoy this presentation. As you heard when you first came in, this is being recorded and will be posted in the virtual event platform under her session. We do have a Q&A function that is available. So we encourage you guys to ask questions. Courtney indicated that she does like an interactive discussion. So feel free to fire away. I will be monitoring the chat for her as she goes through her slides. And with that said, I am honored to introduce Courtney Fairchild, president, right?
Yeah.
All right, of Global Services. All right, I will stop talking now and let her get going. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Michelle. I really appreciate you having me. I enjoyed the summit very much in person, and I'm honored to also be included in the virtual. You're not joking that this has been a marathon. I applaud you for all of the wonderful education that you've put on over this month, and I am going to try to add to that in the next hour or so. So as Michelle mentioned, I am president and CEO of Global Services, and for the past 20 plus years, we've been providing proposal development and GSA schedule support for federal contractors. We have helped over 2,500 businesses get awarded a GSA schedule contract, and our total awards are now in excess of $20 billion for the proposals that we've managed as well. So that being said, we're here to try and answer any questions you have about the GSA schedule program. I think it's one of the few programs in the federal industry that have a lot of things surrounding it. And there's a lot of misinformation as well as good information out there. So we're going to try and make sure that we stay with all of the good information today. So my goal is to give you an overview of the GSA schedule program and then tell you some of the things that may make you think twice about wanting a GSA schedule, so that by the end of today, you might have a better sense of whether or not the program is right for you or not. There is one single GSA multiple award schedule now. They merged the previous 24 plus GSA schedules into the multiple award schedule. And what is the true definition of a GSA schedule? And that is that it is just a listing of the contractors that have been awarded a contract by GSA through that program. So think of it as a ginormous catalog. The online catalog is in the e-library, and I'll provide a link for you later in the presentation so you can take a look at that. But the idea is that you are an approved vendor to be able to sell to all federal ordering agencies should they choose to use the GSA schedule. It mirrors your commercial buying practices, meaning that you're allowed to create your own labor categories, your own products, rather than responding to a specific RFQ or request for quote through the GSA schedule at the awarded level. You're actually following your own commercial practices, both from a technical and from a price perspective. They are all past performance based. So I'm going to say this probably a couple of times this afternoon. And that is that GSA schedules are not about what you can do, but rather what you have done over the last 2 years. And lastly, it's really just to facilitate procurement, right? The reason that you may want a GSA schedule is that you would have an ordering agency that wished you had one that has the need, budget, and authority to purchase from you. The other thing I want to say, and again, I might say it 100 times, is that the fact that you can qualify for a schedule doesn't necessarily mean you should get a schedule. The thing that I ask over and over again to potential federal contractors that want to use our service to get on GSA schedule is why. To whom are you marketing and how do they buy? If you answer that question, the federal government, and you don't know your ordering agencies and you don't know how they buy, I would say, hold. You've got to be able to do the research to figure out when you're doing proactive business development, how to be able to close the business using the GSA schedule, right? It's an opportunity closure tool, not necessarily, although sometimes could be an opportunity identification tool. There is one set of terms and conditions associated with the multiple award schedule. And here's the brief overview, just so that we all get on the same page before we start talking a little bit more through the program. The first is that it is government-wide. Any federal ordering agency can use the GSA schedule if they want, as well as it has worldwide optional scope. So you have the ability to be able to sell domestically and worldwide to federal ordering agencies. The GSA schedule is an open season solicitation. This is super relevant for all types of businesses because there is no closing date on the actual proposal or the date by which you must submit. This gives you the freedom and the ability to be able to submit your GSA schedule proposal if and when you are ready. That is a really powerful thing, and it is also sort of problematic because what I find is that many companies want to obtain a GSA schedule, and then they don't put the right resources to getting it done. Because it doesn't have a due date, it falls behind all other things that actually happen. So we are working through making sure that you have the right resources to be able to put the proposal together. Secondarily, the GSA schedules are 5-year periods of performance with 3 5-year follow-on options. So that leaves us with a potential of a 20-year contract vehicle. That's called Evergreen Contracting in accordance with the Federal Acquisition Regulation, or the FAR. And there is no contract that is longer than 20 years. You actually aren't allowed to procure for more than 20-year periods of time. And even then, that requires a recertification of your size and an extension of the contract every 5 years. There are no selling caps through the GSA schedule. So unlike the HubZone sole source or woman-owned sole source, there are caps to what you can put through the program. That is not true for a GSA schedule. There is no cap to the amount of money that you can put through on an order or a total contract or blanket purchase agreement. There are no Fed Biz Ops posting requirements. That should say SAM.gov, as we have moved Fed Biz Ops over to SAM. But that means also that you are not necessarily seeing the opportunities that go through the GSA schedule for your competition. Unlike SAM, where you can see those things that are out there, unless you are awarded a GSA schedule contract for a certain special item number, you will not see the request for quotations that go through eBuy or Advantage. The GSA schedule requires that the ordering agency obtain 3 RFQs and make a best value award. This is one of the real highlights of the program, because if you are proactively marketing to your competition, this is a much reduced competition versus something that the ordering agency is going to either put out as a full and open competition, where everyone on SAM might have access to it. But even more importantly, that a best value award is an allowable award to make, meaning that you do not necessarily have to be the best price. We would all be silly to think that best price isn't at the foremost mind for our ordering agencies and potential clients. However, it could be that there is a best value determiner, such as you are a hub zone company, or you did some initial work, and this is logical follow-on. There is no definition to what a best value is in accordance with the ordering procedures for GSA. So it's slightly subjective, which could be both good and bad, depending on the ordering agency and how familiar they are with ordering off of a GSA schedule. The highlight of a GSA schedule is that your pricing is determined fair and reasonable in accordance with the federal acquisition regulations by GSA. That means they set your ceiling prices, your ceiling pricing that you can't go above when utilizing your GSA schedule contract. It also means that the ordering agency does not have to determine the fair and reasonable pricing. They have to make a best value determination based on the RFQs. It's a little bit less work. It's actually a lot less work in terms of acquisition. So if your ordering agency is familiar and likes to use the GSA schedule, while the upfront obtaining of the awarded contract and negotiating with GSA is more work, the back end in bidding is less work when you have that opportunity in front of you. You're allowed to spot discount when using the GSA schedule. And that just means this. I can give one ordering agency a discount. Again, we set our ceiling pricing, our highest pricing for GSA schedule on any product or service, but I'm allowed to offer discounts to individual ordering agencies without having to reduce my price permanently to that level. It could be based on the staffing that I know I'm going to use, so I have the ability to give a greater discount, or it could be based on a volume, et cetera. There is an industrial funding fee, 0.75 or 0.75%, that is associated with the GSA schedule. That is the fee that ordering agencies pay to GSA through you to be able to use the contract. It is a very transparent, one of the lowest usage fees in the federal government. And what ends up happening is that you build that 0.75% into your price, you bill the ordering agency, and when they pay, you pay the industrial funding fee and report quarterly. Sometimes you report monthly. It depends on whether or not you submit it as a part of what is called the transactional data reporting, which is more detail than we probably need to get into, but I'll discuss a little bit more about that later when we talk about some of the pricing constraints. As you can see, there's a lot to like about the multiple award schedule. What you're seeing here, these cognizant terms and conditions, are basically that it makes you an available agent. It's a long-term contract, and it allows some flexibility in terms of pricing when you go to use the contract itself. There are many different reasons that an ordering agency might want to use a GSA schedule, but it usually comes down to the individual that's doing the ordering to begin with. So the advantages for industry of a multiple award schedule are that they are already considered a priority source of supply under FAR Part 8. And that's just by way of saying that ordering agencies typically have a list from 1 down of how they need to be able to procure. And while GSA schedules are not a required source of supply, they are a priority source of supply. So they come above some other contracts. They allow you a direct customer relationship. GSA gets involved when they are negotiating the master rates of the contract itself, but they don't get involved in between you and your client. So it allows you to create and maintain the customer relationship that you may want with your ordering agency, that then has the ability to make a best value decision and allows for a lot more customization. The GSA schedules, being based on your own commercial practices, allow for more customization than some other generic contract vehicles out there. We talked about the limited competition, which is very attractive. If you are proactively in front of an opportunity, it allows you the ability to close that without necessarily getting more people than necessary involved. One of the interesting things about the program is that small and large businesses have the same regulations and can participate in the program. We've helped Accenture with their GSA schedule, and we've helped 1- and 2-person companies and everything in between. So it allows for maximum participation. And speed is probably the reason that, especially around this time of year, we hit fiscal year end, the speed of acquisition is far less on a GSA schedule, something like 2 weeks typically from RFQ release to award, as opposed to a full and open competition. Gartner did a study that says that's about 9 months, right? So if you have that opportunity in front of you, this allows for you to close it in a much faster fashion, assuming that the ordering agency has a good sense of how to use the GSA schedule contract. The advantages for government are pretty similar. However, it's about access. They have, through the GSA multiple award schedule, access to millions of state-of-the-art commercial products and services. Orders can be placed by any government employee with purchase authority. And there's some built-in time and money saving tools that are really helpful. Teaming arrangements, there's contractor teaming arrangements, which allows for multiple GSA schedule holders to come together and place bids. Blanket purchase agreements can be placed against the GSA schedule, meaning repetitive, long-term, larger purchases. And as I said, your pricing is already determined fair and reasonable in accordance with the FAR. So it's less work for an ordering agency to have to make that purchase through a GSA schedule. Again, the only reason to get on schedule is you have an ordering agency that wants you to, right? There's an opportunity or the chance for opportunity in the future to be able to sell to that ordering agency because you got on the contract. As I said earlier, a GSA RFQ goes through in about 2 weeks, and if full and open, about 9 months. Sounds pretty good. It makes the initial time to get on GSA schedule contract, which can be anywhere from 3 to 12 months, worth it when you're looking at your long-term procurement over a 20-year contract period, to be able to lessen some of those timelines and be able to close more business. One of the things that I love about the program is the ability to set aside orders. So you can set aside orders or BTAs for any socioeconomic concern, including hub zone. This means that a small business set aside through the GSA schedule is far easier than doing a sole source in accordance with the federal acquisition regulations. It has to do with being a set aside versus a sole source. And it's a great way, especially for hub zone companies that have limited competition, to be able to cut down the number of companies that are even listed. So you've got a special item number that you qualify under, and only those businesses are going to be able to participate to begin with. And then you further cull it down by a hub zone, woman-owned, or any other socioeconomic, and there is a much more limited competition. So if you are driving this through the GSA schedule, you're really increasing your chances to win. The regulations only require that you recertify your size every 5 years. So if you organically grow out of your primary NAICS, North American Industrial Classification Standard, through the GSA Schedule program, you do not recertify as long as that growth was organic and you have not been purchased. You don't recertify until the 5-year period. So there are companies that have elongated their small business size through the timing of when they actually get the GSA Schedule contract, which is absolutely legal. The other thing about GSA schedules is that they are Trade Agreement Act compliant. They must be. So you cannot list products or cannot provide services from non-designated countries. The TAA Act has a list of those countries. Obviously, North America is one of them. There's a list of other designated countries where you can have your product either produced, manufactured, or services produced. The example that I'm going to give you is that you cannot actually provide services out of a non-designated country. So a good example would be India. You cannot provide IT services or any professional services from India because they are not one of the designated countries. I am going to read the question that came in. The fee, the question is, the fee, the industrial funding fee is paid by the agency. Do you bill the agency the monthly invoice and then pay GSA? So I'm going to explain exactly how that works in just a little bit. But the answer is that you collect the fee and then transmit the fee to GSA. And I will give you a visual that explains exactly that. Thank you for the question. My slides are running just a little bit slowly through this, so I apologize. When we get to the next slide, I will start you again. The next slide, luckily, is exactly the question that was just asked, which is, how is that industrial funding fee paid? And our next slide is the services ordering summary. GSA schedules have their own set of federal acquisition regulations for order, okay? And the services is basically the order summary that the ordering agency has a task. They decide whom they want to issue that task. So in this scenario, you'll see Schedule 1, 2, and 3. Those are contractors. They make a best value determination following our arrows and issue the task order. That money bag is paid to you. So as you actually are invoicing the ordering agency inclusive of the industrial funding fee, you then remit the 0.75% industrial funding fee through the sales reporting portal to GSA. So orders under $10,000 represent the micro purchase threshold, and orders can be made from any GSA schedule holder without any competition. Orders over 10,000 and between your maximum order threshold, the ordering agency has to evaluate 3 RFQs and make the best value determination, as we discussed. The statement of work is between the ordering agency and you. GSA does not get involved at the order level, right? So you're maintaining your contract administratively with GSA. You are doing that work with the ordering agency itself and maintaining that relationship, which is a very important aspect of the program. All right, so I'm going to take a breath. Michelle, are there any other questions before I move on?
No, but there wasn't questions that came in that because you covered both of those. However, I kind of had a question.
Of course you
do. Yeah, obviously. It shows I'm paying attention. But when you just made the comment about under the simplified acquisition, they can just do a sole source, like does it frequently happen where they might just do a bunch of individual, like, couldn't you just do a bunch of little small task orders, which could kind of lead up, or is there like no?
Yeah, I mean, so your lawyers will tell you that if they are, well, technically correct, right, that you could do a whole bunch of little things, that if it can be proven later that those are linked, and that you're just trying to break it down, that will be problematic. If they're really different things, it's allowable. The only other thing that I would say is that you don't need to have a schedule to do work under the $10,000 threshold. So if you don't need to be located, good examples of this are trade show paraphernalia or training, things that are always where the constant purchase is going to be under that number. I might suggest that you don't need a GSA schedule. That micro purchase threshold is not just true on GSA, but it is true not through the GSA schedule, meaning that you may not need, if your average purchase is under $10,000, then you may not need a schedule. And so another good example, Michelle, is someone not buying a bunch of different people buying that class as opposed to someone buying the class for, 100 people, which would put it over the micro purchase threshold. So really good question. I think go ahead. Sorry.
No, that definitely answered it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I think I've answered, sort of why you might want a GSA schedule. And now I'm going to give you the flip side. I'm going to talk about whether you can qualify for a schedule and then whether you should or want to, given some of the parameters. This contract vehicle is not just about how you can get on it, but there's also some compliance issues longer term that I think most companies ignore. So I try to explain upfront what this is going to entail so you have a good sense of whether or not it's something that you want to deal with longer term. But let's start with, can you qualify or do you qualify for a GSA schedule? Sorry, Michelle, you raised your hand.
I just realized that I'm not sure that we did address Donald's question.
Okay.
Where he, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
If my company was 8A when we applied for GSA last year, but we were not 8A now, am I still considered an 8A through the 5 years of the GSA contract?
So technically you don't recertify until the 5-year mark, but an ordering agency has the right to request a size or socioeconomic recertification at task order level. And anyone that's doing it a set aside usually does that. So while technically that 8A is going to exist on your master contract until you recertify, you may not be able to utilize it that way.
But historically, agencies tend to like to take credit for things, regardless of how it is solicited. So the likelihood that you will probably, that the agency will be taking credit for that is probably pretty high because it works in their
really
favor.
Good point. Really
So
good point. And they like to double count everything as well. So if you're
Yeah.
HubZone and 8A and Woman O, they're going to take all of that credit for that single order for sure.
Yeah. So there's a strong possibility. It depends on what is more favorable for them.
Agreed. Totally agreed. And if you're driving it, right? They can use it either a way of keeping you out or keeping other people out, depending on what the favor of the person making that procurement is as well. All right, so thank you. I'm going to move on to, can you get a GSA schedule? The past performance requirements of a GSA schedule typically are this. You've got to be in business running revenue for 2 years. So it's not meant for a new company typically. There's one exception. If you are an IT provider, there is something called the Springboard program. I will, if that's the case and you really are thinking about that, please also, my email address, this email address at the bottom will come to me, and all my contact information is here. I don't like the Springboard program because it introduces some other requirements that might make it harder than just waiting your 2 years. It just depends on what the reality of your situation is. From a past performance standpoint for experience, you must have at least one project that you've completed in the last 2 years that fits the same scope of that SIN. And if that's for professional services, and if it's an IT services project of any kind, you have to have 2. The tasks have to be similar complexity to the work solicited under each SIN. So you heard me say earlier, this isn't about what you can do. You could hire 12 IT engineers today that have the capability of performing. Until you have past performance in the special item number, until you have sold, you will not qualify under that SIN. And speaking of selling, from a pricing standpoint, product or service, you must have sold what you want to put on the schedule previously. You've got to have an invoice, not an awarded IDIQ, not a contract that you haven't billed against, not a quote, not your competitor's pricing. You must have sold that product or service in order to get it on schedule. You must have done what you want to do on the GSA schedule within the last 2 years. So that leads people to say, let me look at what I've done for the last 2 years and will this make it worth it? Could I get through this process, but only have a couple of labor categories, meaning that I qualify in technically for the special item number, but I've only billed for a software developer and a program manager? Great, you will be able to get the GSA schedule contract as long as you've had 2 projects that fit the past performance. But if I get a GSA schedule for 2 labor categories, how am I going to sell off of it? When an RFQ, a request for quote, comes out, how will I be able to use just 2 labor categories and 2 rates to be able to bid everything that an ordering agency is asking for in a performance-based statement of work? So the juxtaposition here is, when do you have enough that you would be able to bid things that come through the GSA schedule? And that's usually about the right timing. The other past performance requirement is that you have to have a customer reference. So there's 2 ways to do that now. You either have 3 or CPARs, that's the contractor past performance rating system. Very few small businesses have 3 CPARs. And if you don't, you provide points of contact and what are called past performance narratives from 3 customers, and they will fill out what's called a PPQ, a past performance questionnaire. This is GSA's way of trying to check your past performance, not just what you say you do, but clients. So if you don't have 3 clients that can answer this, there's going to be no way for you to be able to proceed through the process. So you have to keep that in mind as well. When we get to the pricing, GSA schedules are very different from all other proposals. Most proposals are cost-based in some way, based on what it costs you to provide that service. GSA schedules are not. They are based on fully burdened rates that you have invoiced to commercial and any other customers, including the federal government if need be. That means, and the pricing is also constrained on the product side. What have you billed for that product or service? I'm going to get into what is a pretty technical pricing issue, but I need you to understand what you're signing up for when you get a GSA schedule. So GSA's pricing goal is to get better than the best price that you give to anyone for that same product or service. They call it most favored customer. You can read that as lowest price. So for that labor category, for that fixed price service, for that product, what is the best price that you've given to anyone in the last 2 years for this same thing? GSA is the largest purchasing arm in the world and believes that they should get better than the best price for their customers, being the entire federal government. It's not absurd, right? But if you're doing work for a certain company, ordering agency, commercial entity, and you gave them such a break, this could cause a problem for you, because you've got to disclose what we call your most favored customer, your commercial sales practices, and what the pricing is for every product and service that you put on schedule. The most favored customer is defined as the customer that receives your best pricing concession. It's very often a class of customers, something like all commercial customers or state and local, nonprofit. It could be a class as opposed to an actual name of a customer. And the basis of award is set at the time of award, and it's used to track the discount relationship between what you claim is your most favored customer or the lowest rate and the GSA rate. So I'm going to give you an example. Again, this is slightly complicated, but I want to take the time to take you through it. Your basis of award customer is not always the same as your most favored customer. So you could, for instance, have given the federal government lower pricing, but your basis of award is commercial customers. So you disclose the lower rates for the federal, but your basis of award, where you're tracking the discount relationship between the pricing that you give that customer and your GSA price, is the relevant issue. In this scenario, I'm going to use it for services. We're going to just generically talk about my labor category as program manager. In this scenario, we'll say my program manager has a bachelor's and 10 years of experience. There's also a functional responsibility I've given GSA. And so when I am tracking the price reduction clause, which I'm going to talk about, or my most favored customer pricing, I may not always call that on an invoice program manager. But if it is functionally the same labor category with the same minimums of education and experience requirements, then it is a mappable equivalent. Don't get caught up in thinking that you can just bill different titles to get out of the price reduction clause. In this scenario, I bill my program manager when I am working as a prime at $150. I also bill my program manager working as a prime at $100 or $125, sorry. Then when I am working as a subcontractor, I billed that at 100 and 105, right? So I have the same program manager on my invoice, anywhere from $100 to $150. Well, GSA will analyze that information because I'm duty bound to disclose it and say, thank you very much. We are going to make your most favored customer rate where you are a subcontractor at $100. And we are going to ask you for a discount off that rate, right? So now, not only I am at my commercial floor where I have said the rate is $100. There is nothing lower than that. And in order to be able to bill below that $100, I would have to make a change to GSA. So let's see what this looks like. The $100 is my commercial floor. The GSA rate of $90 is what GSA negotiated with me. That means that they negotiated a 10% discount from the $100 rate, okay? So GSA said, thank you very much. Not only did they take my lowest rate, they wanted better than my lowest rate. That's what that 10% discount represents. So we have a 10% delta between my commercial floor and the ceiling rate on my GSA, okay? I'm allowed to spot discount to a federal ordering agency. That's what that $85 that just popped up is. So I can go below $90, but only when utilizing the GSA schedule or to a federal customer. Nobody should be getting the rates that are in this red box because it's my commercial floor. And then I have my federal ceiling. So there is one category. If I have a federal customer that's not using the GSA schedule, is the only person that I can give between $90 and $100 for this program manager, okay? There is a clause in the GSA schedule called the price reduction clause. And it basically says that you're going to maintain the relationship between that basis of award customer and GSA for the life of this contract. Should you go below $100 to a commercial customer in this scenario, you have 15 calendar days to notify GSA that you have triggered what's called the price reduction clause and lower your GSA rate by the same amount. So in this scenario, I suddenly have this opportunity where I really need to be able to bill below $100. It's a large subcontract, and I really need to be able to bill $95. In that scenario, I then have to say, GSA, my new most favored customer rate is $95. That's a 5% decrease, and we're going to, within 15 days, notify GSA and drop our GSA rate from $90 to $85.50, right? The same 5%. By doing that, I then have to make sure that I am not billing above this rate for any current work. So I may be awarded GSA schedule work at $90. But if I have to drop my rate, I have to then also drop the rate when I continue to bill from the date that that rate becomes effective forward. Michelle, did you have another question, or is your hand still raised?
No, I think I just didn't realize my hand was still raised because
No
I was
problem.
watching.
I just want to make sure. No, not at all. This is all a little bit getting in the weeds, but I bring this up for a reason. If you can't control how it is that you're pricing commercially, the GSA schedule is not a great place to play for a lot of reasons. One, you may have to do some of this price reduction issue. If you don't do this and GSA audits you, what ends up happening is, in this scenario, for instance, they would say, but your real most favored customer rate should have been 95, and they'll take the difference on every hour that you build the program manager over this 85.50 starting on that effective date. So you end up paying back penalties, and it gets really complicated. So what I say to companies is to institute a commercial price list. Not commercial, an internal price list. Don't call it commercial. It's a market rate sheet. What I want you to do, whether you're selling products or you're selling services, is to really think about how you define these things. In our scenario, we had 4 different rates. That could have been in program manager 1, 2, 3, and 4, with differing education, experience, or functional responsibility. What I want you to do is to, whether you've used them yet or not, is to have something where you are standardizing your commercial practices, standardizing what your invoices to all other entities look like. If I'm billing a program manager 1, 2, 3, and 4, then I get to have all 4 of those on my GSA schedule at the different associated rates. And I lower my risk, because moving forward, instead of just program manager and then billing that at 100 versus 150, I have these places to go. The same is true for product, for version control, for differing things that product might be able to offer. The only trick is that I have to have sold this way in order to be able to do it. So if I've only sold at 100, I don't get my program manager 4 at 150, right? So you have to, for those of you that are thinking about this, sometimes after talking to me, what companies do is take a year to standardize their pricing practices, to make sure on their invoices, they're getting the right names. If your prime wants you to call something on an invoice, they're not going to stop you from also billing your title. So it could be that the ordering agency or the commercial entity asks you for a SME, but that's really the functional responsibilities program manager 2. You could have SME - program manager 2 on your invoice, which would really help you later. Think about how you document your invoicing, product or services, because to add anything over time, you must have an invoice, or to obtain a brand new GSA schedule, you must have an invoice. And I think that's where people really get caught up. If you do this right and do it well, you can manage the compliance risk of the price reduction clause very effectively. If you do not, you open yourself up to a lot of risk, and in ways that the GSA schedule might not actually be the right answer for you. So let's assume that I haven't scared you out of the GSA schedule completely yet. What is the plan? How do I start? The idea is that you download the solicitation. The appropriate solicitation now is on sam.gov. It's also on the e-library. Pay attention to that link. The e-library link is where you can see any contractor's award information. You are allowed to look at their labor categories, their pricing, their products, all of the information, right? So before I decide to jump on schedule, I'm going to do enough research to figure out if I'm going to be competitive. I'm going to determine which are the right special item numbers, which are now North American Industrial Classification Standard based. And I'm going to analyze the RFP and attachments and make sure that I'm truly eligible to prime the schedule. I can give GSA everything that they're asking for. And lastly, I'm going to allocate the right resources to put those things in place and make sure that it gets done. That's where so many people fall down. GSA has been refreshing their solicitation every month or so, or every 2 months since they start putting out the new multiple award schedule. We're on refresh 7 and it's been less than 2 years. So it's happening quickly. If you don't get this done in the right time frame, you're going to find yourself redoing the forms over and over again. And then you get so tired of doing it that people either give up or they call someone like ourselves. So I am going to leave some time for questions. I appreciate everyone being here today. I know that we're getting a little fatigued, or at least Michelle is, in terms of how many presentations that we're doing. But I'm gonna pause and just see if we have any additional questions.
So it looks like we got one from Christopher. He said, we are a professional services firm. Most of our contracts are fixed fee rather than billable hours. Are all GSA service contracts based on billable hours? Would we need to revamp the way that we bill for GSA schedule to be an option for us?
So Christopher, this depends on what you want to do with the schedule. You're allowed to have fixed fee services on your GSA schedule contract as long as that's what the invoice displays. The question for you becomes, is that how you're going to do business in the future? When an RFQ comes out, if it is asking for hourly rates, then you may not be able to bid it with your fixed fees. So the questions that I would ask back to you is, what kind of professional service is it? And how are you doing federal work now? How are they buying? And then making sure that you move forward that way. You can break your fixed fee into hourly rates if you do that in your proposal, or you could start doing it now, so that you're still billing a fixed fee, but there's a backup to it with labor categories and associated rates and number of hours, so that you may have the best of both worlds. Bidding fixed price work doesn't preclude you from being able to have hourly GSA schedule categories, as long as you can demonstrate as a part of that proposal what the backup to that fixed fee is. So I think that's the answer, but part of it depends on how you intend to bid. A lot of companies take their fixed price work, break down to hourly categories, and then again, bid fixed price work building up when using the schedule. GSA schedules have to be based on things that are listed on your contract. So even if, so an engineering firm, you're gonna wanna start looking at hourly rates, because the government's purchasing a lot of engineering, but they're almost always doing it time and material, or they're asking for a fixed price based on time and material. So what I just said was true. You may need to break it down to get the hourly rates on the schedule. And then when bidding, if they're asking for a fixed price, you use those hourly rates to build back up to a fixed price as well. So it works in both directions. But that's a really good question, and a pretty common thing, because the commercial world tends to do a lot more fixed price, and the government tends to be more time and materials. And as long as Christopher just answered again, some of the work is billable, but the rates have varied. And right, that's what we're talking about. Is that okay? Can you make them different levels? Can you define the functional responsibility, education, and experience differently or are you okay to drop to the lowest rate by each of those hourly rates? And so the information that I have given you just may make you decide that you don't want to do something like this for another year until you actually shore up what your commercial practices are, and that you're waiting for a certain contract to end, so you stop billing below a certain rate, or you create a new category for it. As long as it's really something that is different and you can define the differentiator, that's possible. When you think about products, software have versions, right? There's different things included. And so as you create a new version, the old version's price is no longer relevant, but you do have to have sold the new version in order to demonstrate your price as well. You did raise your hand now, Michelle. What's going on?
I did. So I'm curious, because like with the rate structures, with everything that's going on about increasing minimum wage, and that's making drastic jumps. How does that impact individuals' current pricing models? That they're going to have to be, do they go back to the drawing board? Are they stuck at,
Yeah, no, this is a good question. The majority of the services on GSA Schedule are professional services and not SCLS or wage determined compliant, although some of them are. So that does become an issue. You do have to stay within the wage determinations, and you will have to go in and ask for what's called an economic price adjustment as those things increase. The problem is on those things that have already been awarded, you would have to go back and do a modification to the existing contract. And I think that's where all federal contractors had a problem with some of that new legislation. Not necessarily that we don't agree with a higher wage, but that it should only apply to those things we're bidding now moving forward, as opposed to those where we've already put staff in place and rates and bids and awarded contracts, because it's very hard to perform when your cost suddenly increases and you're not allowed to raise your rates. No question about that.
in the same way with supplies too, we'd have a significant supply chain issue. Costs are going up there, and it becomes almost impossible. And even if certain rates don't increase, like, you're obviously going to have individuals that are going to want comparable raise increases, like, because people are going to be like, hey, I'm not going to make the same amount as this entry level person over here, because this isn't, it makes it very difficult recruiting.
You could not be more right. And from the supply side, this has happened in the past where the cost of rubber went up considerably. It's slightly easier on products because you can prove that the cost went up and you can prove that your commercial price list went up. As long as you're billing the higher rate somewhere else, there's an easier and better justification for product than there is for services.
The next question we got in, most of our work is subcontracted and we do not always have control over the pricing, or we are asked to adjust the services we provide. My concern is being able to adhere to the pricing compliance.
So the pricing compliance has nothing to do with the work that you subcontract. It's you have ceiling rates. So as long as your subcontract work can fit under those rates, that's fine. But you're going to have to gain control over the pricing. If you're going to use a subcontractor, they have to fit under your rates or it won't work. So there's no question that you have to have good relationships and understand and maybe have longer term commitments in terms of what that subcontractor is going to do and perform for you if you're not going to W-2 your own employees.
Okay, I have a question. It might be very stupid, but I was curious why, if you were going to do a teaming strategy, you can only team with somebody that's already on the schedule. If you have a schedule, why couldn't you be able to team with another company?
You can actually. You can actually. So there's two different ways. I typically have slides on this, but in only an hour, there's only so much we can go through. But there is a traditional prime sub relationship that's allowable through a schedule. As long as I have a schedule, I can subcontract that work. If it's a set aside, the person, the company, the similarly situated and the 51% issues still apply. But if it is not a set aside, I could subcontract 100% of that work to someone that does not have a GSA schedule, as long as I have everything on my schedule contract that we're bidding. For small businesses, sometimes that's problematic. Because remember, I can only put the things on schedule that I have actually invoiced in the last 2 years. So sometimes the inclusion of multiple GSA schedule contract holders allows us to expand on the breadth of what we can provide, because I may not have, Lockheed Martin's can have everything they need and use all subcontractors on their GSA schedule. But as a small business, I might be missing some things and I have to find a teaming partner that has it on the contract, or it's not going to be considered a GSA bid. Good question, Mo.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to hear that. One thing we didn't really pinpoint on here is a lot of companies that are subcontracting. Can you give a little bit of detail about how the schedules are a little bit unique, because it also translates to state? Because I don't feel like it's leveraged as much, and just tell them that process.
Yeah. So of the GSA schedules previously, before they were all merged, there were 2 schedules that are open to what's called cooperative purchasing, or state and local purchasing. And it was only the IT schedule and the Schedule 84 for law enforcement and security. So when they merged the schedules, those things still apply, meaning you can sell off your GSA schedule to state and local, but only if they're IT or the special item numbers that previously applied to the Schedule 84. The only exception to that is during times of disaster. Disaster recovery allows state and local purchase for all things at the time of a disaster. So that could be physical, it could be pandemic, it could be, a tornado, whatever those things are. So at some point, all the SINs are open to state and local purchase, but just generally, if it's not a time of disaster, it's only those 2.
In your personal opinion, do you think that should change? Do you, given what we're trying to do and a lot of the influx in DOT that, and this is personal opinion, not
no, I mean, I certainly would think that both GSA and ordering agencies have a lot to, state and local have a lot to gain from doing that. There's some legal reasons why. We can get Calero to pipe in here at some point, but there are reasons why they started there as a pilot program, but I certainly think where we're going is to have it more widely available. And I think right now in pandemic, it's interesting. It's almost impossible to say that all of them aren't technically in times of disaster.
I would concur with that. We had earlier on here, we had Stephen Bartley from GSA. He's one of the business development specialists. So in case you guys were unaware, GSA actually has business development specialists, and he has gone out to client sites and worked with them and helped them develop strategies. So that's super cool. But he actually had sent an email about trying to figure out how we can do ways to expand it to the state level. So hint, hint, Courtney, that's going to be coming down the pike to you at WIP as well. So because he specifically, and so I've already forwarded that over to our advocacy team. So we'll probably be hopefully working with WIP.
That's
on recording.
That is perfect. Thank you so much. We look forward to
that. So I know that we fired a lot of questions at you, but does anybody else have any other questions? Because we really appreciate Courtney being here with us today. So speak now or forever hold your peace, guys.
Well, yeah, or you can
email her and you can do all of that. I mean, obviously, So it looks like we don't
did
have
well
any
on timing, huh? Good. Okay.
Oh my gosh, it was so perfect on time. Oh, you could not have been any more perfect on timing.
There we go.
And I secretly got some of my questions answered that I've been waiting. So with that, Courtney, do you want to go ahead and type your email right there?
Sure.
Or do you have it on
but
the
you
slide?
can use it. It's on the bottom of every slide.
Oh,
that
the bottom
global,
of the slide right there.
The global at globalservicesinc.com will come to me. Thank you.
Lucky her. That's kind of how mine is. If people are like, oh, that's general, and be like, no, we're not that lucky. It still comes.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you find out if you have a GSA schedule?
You would look up your company on the e-library.
Yes.
You can look up either your DUNS number or your company, legal company name as is in SAM on the e-library link that we provided about 4 slides ago.
Yes, and the e-library actually is very easy to use to just type into it. So GSA e-library. GSA has a number of tools that she showed in those slides. Encourage everybody to check them out. I don't understand why all of our other agencies like SBA can't have cool tools like that.
Yeah, they actually
Because-
do. They do a pretty good job at this. I agree.
Yeah, they do, but they get a lot more money for it. So
Well, then
you
there's
know,
that. They have a lot
poor
more money. Well,
SBA.
we're the ordering agencies through the investor funding fee. There was $36 billion that went through this program in 2020, and GSA made 0.75% of that. So that's how they fund the program.
Oh, well, hopefully I've been still just dropping hints going, GSA, why don't you just do a partnership with SBA and let's get them some cooler tools.
I like it. I like
it. Well, with that said, I will stop making insinuating comments in hopes that, somebody's listening. But I appreciate that. And Courtney, as always, this was absolutely wonderful. And you can go ahead and close us out.
Thanks so much. I really
Bye,
appreciate
everybody.
everyone being here. Have a great day. Bye, everybody.